This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, farmers anxiously await the opportunity to plant the 2023 crops. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's broadcast. Mr. Pearson here alongside me. Have you traveled in the past week?
You know, I haven't traveled very far, Max. It's been a lot of two-lane highways across Iowa and Illinois, but I tell you, I'm seeing a lot of tractors sitting out, being worked on, ready to get into the field. Yeah,
farmers are ready to go with the seed. They're just wanting to see conditions improve a bit. It's something I talked about with Doug Reynolds. As I was at the meeting of the National Agri-Marketing Association, I had the privilege of emceeing their awards program at their conference in St. Louis. Doug is with Corteva, and he addressed the conversation with me, this waiting game that farmers are playing and how conditions do indeed vary across the major producing areas.
It's probably been as variable as we've seen in a stretch of time over the last couple of weeks, as we've seen for a while. But, ultimately, I think what we're seeing aligns to what USDA came out with on Monday in their planting report, where we're actually pacing ahead of the average. So we always feel good about that. Here we are at the end of April. But upper Midwest, still getting cold temperatures, some late snow. I'd say the I-states, USDA said we're in that 8 to 10% planted range across both corn and soybeans. But you get further south, especially that Mid-South geography, Boot Hill and Missouri, they've really made a lot of good progress in the last week to 10 days.
So many producers have been advancing their soybean planting a little bit each year. They've been getting results from doing that. Many of them tell us. And once again, they watch weather closely and wonder about that bean down in there in cold temperatures. But one grower shared with me, he'd taken a photograph of the bean had sprouted. He said, we're looking good so far.
Yeah, isn't it interesting over, the last many years, we have seen farmers, and our data would back it up too, that change in mindset of going earlier with soybeans, there can definitely be a payoff there with that. And of course the genetics have improved, and we've seen it across our Corteva lineup with just, the vigor. Certainly our seed treatment lineup is a real great management tool if you're going to plant early. But yeah, I think that mindset of get the corn in, plant beans later, we've seen that go by the wayside. And if a field condition is fit and the temperature is trending in the right direction, I don't think farmers nowadays hesitate to go ahead and hook onto that bean planter and go ahead and get some beans planted early.
In his visit with me, Doug said the calendar is still in our favor, as he put it. We're just at the end of April. Well, here's something else we're watching to see how it's progressing, and it's not moving very quickly. That's the development of a new farm bill in Washington. I visited about that this week with former U.S. Department of Agriculture official, former Director of Agriculture for the state of Missouri, Richard Fordyce, who also farms in Missouri. I noted while visiting with Richard that there are, in fact, some obstacles in the way of getting that farm bill passed.
Your definition of obstacles is probably a good one. I think the crafters were pretty positive in the ability to be able to get something passed some months ago. But you've seen these develop over the years, and we need to be a little further along at this stage of the game to be able to say we're going to have something passed and on a president's desk by the expiration of this farm bill, which is September 30th. And I think that certainly there's always that conversation around the nutrition title. How do you balance the nutrition title and some of the requirements around that, and also obviously what we probably are keeping our eye on, the commodity title, conservation title, credit title, those kinds of things within the farm bill. And I think there's probably more alignment, at least the folks that I'm talking to, on what we would say is more farmer-facing in the farm bill, maybe than what is in that nutrition title at this point. So, boy, I don't know. I was pretty optimistic a few months ago that they'd get something done, talking to the leaders on both in the House and the Senate. But boy, it just looks like they're going to have to hurry if they're going to get something done by the expiration.
We have seen at times in the past 11th hour action that has been surprising. We're coming down to the deadline, and they suddenly make things happen some way. Right. But you think of everything that has to take place between now and then, including summer recess.
That's exactly right. And I do visit with the chairman on the House side, Chairman Thompson, and, he's still optimistic that they're going to get something done. And one of the things that I always do tell people when I say, hey, they may not get the Farm Bill passed by the time the 2018 Farm Bill expires, because we only do this every 5 years, sometimes folks forget there is the opportunity to extend the 2018 Farm Bill. So
it's not the end of the world.
It is not the end of the world, and sometimes, we've seen this in the past, they'll extend that Farm Bill so that they can have more deliberate conversations on topics that really probably need a little bit more discussion. And so sometimes an extension is not always a bad thing.
Richard Fordyce, Missouri farmer, former administrator of the Farm Service Agency at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, former commissioner or director of agriculture in the state of Missouri. These days he works with the agency OBP that is headquartered in St. Louis. Osborne Bar Paramore, it's called.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. We're talking today with Matt Roberts, looking at the commodity markets. He's the senior grain and oilseeds economist with Terrain. And Dr. Roberts, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me again, Mike.
This time of year, we're not quite into the thick of planting. We're post the thick of harvest in Brazil. Matt, what news is the market watching for right now?
Well, it is that slow season. We're looking for anything. I think the biggest drivers right now, we're still talking about acreage. We're still talking about how much will get planted in the United States. When we look at that prospective plantings report out of March, we saw a big boost in corn acres in North Dakota. We know how wet, how cold, the weather patterns don't look to change. So there's already discussion. I've heard people telling me in the last 2 weeks, we're going to see 1 million, 2 million, 2.5 million leave corn just because of poor planting prospects in the north. I think it's still way too early. We're talking about final planting dates in those areas in late May, early June. So let's slow the roll a little bit, but people need things to talk about, and that's definitely dominating, I think, the corn market.
It is definitely on the new crop, Matt. On the old crop side, we did see China in the market canceling some corn purchases. This was expected by the trade, was it not?
It wasn't shocking. It wasn't shocking. I mean, we know that exports have been weak all year. When we look at the basis levels, nobody was really surprised by that, but we still don't want to see it happen, especially again in a weak demand year where we're sitting here looking and probably USDA still needs to cut some more out of that export number in the old crop balance sheet. We'd like to see that pace pick up. We're still not there. And so this is just one more thing that kind of undercuts the tone in the overall market, both old and new crop.
On the corn side, as you're thinking about the export market, Matt, how is American corn priced on the world scene, especially compared to Brazil or South American crops?
Right now, we're still priced out of the market. We know that we did not have an exceptional crop last year. The dollar strength is still around. Yes, it's not as strong as it was, but it's still lingering. And so when we look at, for example, the difference between Brazilian or South American corn and United States, we're at a point that if we're not that far from where we could profitably import corn from South America into the United States. Now, with slowing exports here, it's unlikely that's going to be necessary. We're not going to see that happen, but that gives you an idea of how difficult it is for us to be competitive globally.
When we're thinking about that global competitiveness on the corn side, very out of the money. Soybeans, are we a little closer to the global market?
Maybe a little closer, but we're still hearing a lot of talk about Brazilian soybeans coming into North Carolina specifically. Those basis differentials are large enough. So we're still not highly competitive in either. Again, we didn't have a bumper crop last year. It was another overall disappointing set of yields. And we keep that dollar strength. So we are getting some sales out. We are competing on quality. There are some rumors about South American quality that's kind of helping us, but I don't put a lot of stock that that's going to matter.
Okay, all right, it's not going to matter. We're just not going to see it in time for it to materialize, is your thought?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Matt, we've got a lot to think about here in these global markets. We'll be back for more. I want to pick your brain on the wheat side, as all the issues happening there. Stay with us. We'll have more markets in just a moment. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. Welcome back. We're talking markets with Matt Roberts, the senior grain and oilseeds economist with Terrain. And Matt, we were talking about the shift potentially coming in corn acres in the north due to the snow, potentially 2.5 million acres coming out of corn. Would those go into soybeans in your estimation?
Some of it would. If we actually see that many acres leave, and by the way, I still want to underscore, it's way too early to really update our balance sheets. But inevitably, when we see that, we'll see some end up in soybeans, we'll see some end up in prevent planting, particularly with the prices that we had, the strength in prices we had when those crop insurance levels were set. It is a pretty high guarantee level for prevent plant. So I do think that that's going to take a lot of those acres. We will inevitably see some in soybeans. A lot of that's going to be determined in that third week of May. That's when we're going to start to actually get a feel for what's happening in northern acres.
Between those northern acres covered in snow and those southern plains acres still gripped by that drought, even though they've got a little moisture, we could see potentially a big acreage shift in soybeans here midsummer. Matt, should producers be doing anything to manage that risk today?
I'm a big believer in planting or in marketing earlier. I think the one consistent error that probably farmers make is waiting to do too much of their marketing too late. And the simple reason is the market still has to care about your P&L until things are planted. So I'm a bigger fan as we look at this, when we see those rallies selling into them even now. We know we're in planting. We know that overall we are ahead of pace nationally. We're going to move into this period of a weather market, and we're in a weather market where our old crop stocks are tight. We're still inverted in corn. We're still inverted in beans. So our old crop stocks are tight. That means any scares we get over the coming 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to see price responses. Let's use those. Let's catch up in our marketing. And let's not worry about trying to make every swing a home run.
That makes sense, Matt. You mentioned those scares get priced into markets, but we have not seen too many scares get priced into this wheat market yet. And there's a lot cooking between the drought in the plains, the Ukrainian-Russian grain corridor, all these other factors that are going on. Let's talk Chicago wheat right off the bat. What are you watching here in the short term in that market? So
we've seen the pattern with the change in weather pattern. We've certainly seen the Great Plains become wetter. We have seen areas in western Kansas get 1 inch, 2 inches. Some of these areas have not seen 1 inch moisture in a week in 6 to 12 months. So it's devastating drought there. We've finally seen that come through. We've seen wheat respond to that. And by the way, the forecast for the coming 10 days also shows more moisture in a lot of those areas. Now, we've all heard stories about how much wheat failed to emerge in the fall. It's definitely true, but that doesn't mean no wheat emerged. There is wheat there. It has struggled. It is dry. This kind of moisture, it is going to positively impact yields. The bigger impact, though, is going to be on pasture and rangeland, right? That's where the real impact is. But on the wheat, that moisture matters. When we turn, the bigger thing right now, it continues to be driven. Chicago, of course, splits Kansas City and that soft red. Soft red, in fact, I was just driving through Ohio last week, and there's a lot of those wheat fields that look better than my yard. So soft red, I'm not worried about at all. Hard red, it's gotten some boost. We've seen it in prices, but there's a lot of question marks.
There is, and there's not a lot of other question marks in the spring wheat market as well. Matt, again, you talked about the snowfall up there in the north. Does spring wheat have room to run here as we look out over the next 8 weeks or so?
100% yes, because spring wheat also, because it's such high protein, such high quality, we're never swimming in spring wheat. We're always going to be tight. And so as we see this, if we continue to drag along, we're going to continue to see that market get nervous. We're going to see that price in. The hard thing about marketing it is, what do you have to sell? When we have these kind of weather conditions, you don't know when you're going to get it in, and so you don't know when you're going to be able to sell it. And that's exactly why we're going to see, and we always see, so much more volatility in the spring wheat market.
So much to think about as this planting season progresses, folks. We've been talking with Matt Roberts, Senior Grain and Oilseeds Economist with Terrain. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology, brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. The year around, not just at the holiday time, Chad Colby costs me money because he gives me ideas of things that I can use, things that we might need at our little place of the country, and that includes saws. Here's Chad's look this week.
If you followed our tech segments, then you know I love talking about new power tools, and I'm talking about ones that maybe you wouldn't have. And on this week's segment, I'm going to talk about Milwaukee's Hatchet 8-inch pruning saw. Now, I purchased this for a little under $300 around December, January timeframe when it just came out, because I really thought it looked handy. I wasn't sure if I was going to put it on the tech segment or not, but let me tell you, after I got it out of the box, topped off the bar oil, as you can see right here, grabbed a battery, because I've got a whole bunch of them. Before I even got to the tree, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to definitely show this. And the reason why is its compact size. It only weighs 5 pounds without a battery, so depending on how big a battery you put on it. We've talked about chainsaws before on the tech segment. You can see it standing there right in the center of the wall. Standing is that large pole saw, and that thing is super handy, but this, a complete different application. Its size is the deal. It's lightweight, it's easy to use, and like all power tools today, has a tremendous amount of performance. Less than 1 second on the variable speed trigger gets you to full power, which is outstanding. But the compact size, that's the part of this that I underestimated. Easy carry it with one hand. You don't need a big case to take it in. It does come with a case to cover the bar. But what a great tool to throw in your pickup truck, your ATV, your tractor cab. I can think of all kinds of amazing applications. And his size is so perfect to get in tight areas. Trust me, it's going to be one of my favorites on the wall there at Tools. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
It's one of those cases where Chad Colby didn't cost me anything. We had already ordered one of those saws for our little place in the country. Speaking of ordering, a little bit later on, we'll do a book review. It's a book that I recommend, as a matter of fact, looking at the futures markets, economic principles, and it's an autobiography of an Iowa farm boy turned economist.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Now it's time to visit with our friend Charlie Behrens as we learn about the different states and their contributions to American agriculture in the segment we call Ag States of America. Here's Charlie. This week, we're talking about Vermont.
The United States of America can be very different from one state to another, but one thing every state has in common is agriculture.
Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Behrens, and welcome back to the Agricultural States of America, where we explore the agriculture of different states and hopefully give you some more appreciation for all the great things that farmers are producing across America. Now today we're looking at the agriculture in Vermont. Vermont is the second least populated state behind Wyoming, but it contributes significantly to agriculture not just in the US, but around the world. Kind of like an ant carrying something 20 times its weight, Vermont is small, but a mighty contender in American agriculture. In Vermont, the ag industry is behind only tourism and manufacturing in terms of economic impact. Now, most of the land in Vermont is very hilly and rocky, thanks not only to the Green Mountain Ridge, but also the Appalachian, Hoosic, and Taconic. While you might be thinking this terrain is perfect for your next ski trip, it's also ideal for raising livestock, including llamas, sheep, goats, and cows. According to the USDA, Vermont is home to 120,000 dairy cows spread among approximately 700 family-run dairy farms. The economic importance of the dairy industry is significant, with cash receipts around $500 million per year. Then when you add in tourism, especially to the iconic and historic Vermont dairy barns, the economic impact is even higher. Now that's pretty sweet, but if you want to hear something even sweeter, the Vermont state tree is the sugar maple, and the state produces almost 2 million gallons of maple syrup every single year, also known as 9 out of 10 dentists' worst nightmare. Vermont is #1 in the US and #2 in the world for maple syrup production, second only to Quebec, Canada, which I guess is fair considering Canada's flag. I mean, it's just a maple leaf, so of course they're going to be #1. Vermont's maple syrup production, though, isn't just about quantity. The state has its own quality grading system that maintains a higher standard of density than the rest of the US. These strict quality standards grade the syrup on 4 characteristics: color, clarity, density, and flavor. I mean, it's like they're grading diamonds, except it's better because you can't put diamonds on pancakes. I don't care how much they cost, they don't make your pancakes taste better. That's why maple syrup, much better than diamonds. Okay, rant over. In addition to dairy and maple products, Vermont's other top agricultural offerings include turkeys, chicken eggs, hogs, apples, sweet corn, Christmas trees, honey, and hay. Vermont is the #1 hay producer in New England, as its climate and terrain are ideal for growing it. While sourcing ingredients from local farmers, Vermont is known for several iconic and delicious foods, including award-winning artisan cheese and gourmet chocolates, thanks in part to the Vermont dairy industry. So the next time you're in the market for a Valentine's gift, just hit up Vermont. Residents and visitors can also get some protein from locally sourced eggs, venison, bison burgers, and organically raised lamb. For a side, you can always try out fiddleheads, which are young, curled, edible fern fronds harvested and used as a vegetable. And of course, to round out your meal, may I suggest a dessert? You can enjoy sugar on snow, an apple cider donut, or a maple creamy. All classic Vermont treats, guaranteed to make you check your insulin levels. Now, to make sugar on snow, it's pretty easy. It's just you're basically taking fresh snow and you're adding a bunch of heated maple syrup. And I've been told it's best served with a sour pickle or plain donut on the side. And what's a maple syrup creamy, you ask? Now, why it's called a creamy and not soft serve beats me. But there are a bunch of other ways people say soft serve ice cream. In fact, some places outside the US call it a Mr. Whippy, Soft Whip, Mary Cream, or a Softie. Regardless of what you call it, I'll take 2 creamies. And that's all the time we have for now, but you can always go to pivotbio.com/AG states, click on the show icon to explore more about the agriculture of your favorite states and test your knowledge to win great prizes and more. I'm Charlie Behrens, and we'll see you next time on the Agricultural States of America.
Well, our thanks to Charlie Behrens there at the Ag States of America. Max, I tell you what, every time we get one of these segments from Charlie, I always learn something new. And I'll be honest, this week I learned the size of the dairy industry in Vermont. I knew they had a lot of cows. I didn't realize the scale.
Well, obviously it was important because their longtime Senator Patrick Leahy has been very involved in farm bill legislation through the years, and especially the dairy industry, protecting that industry. But that barn looked a little bit larger than I anticipated seeing where cows were milked in Vermont. There is one very strong tie to the dairy industry there. You and I always have backstories to Charlie's segments because we've traveled so much, and we know the ag industry. Well, the Holstein Association USA is headquartered in Brattleboro, Vermont. It's been there since 1903. Let me give you some of the statistics about that group. They have 20,000 members who focus on breeding, raising, milking, and registering those Holstein cows. The Holstein Association processes over 370,000 registrations and 70,000 transfers every year. On an average day, 1,400 registrations of Holstein cows are received or processed there, and some 22 million cows are in the records of the Holstein Association. Or do you say Holstein?
Well, I say Holstein, Max. There's a lot of black and white cattle out there.
There's more coming up on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness, including Greg Solier's agriculture weather forecast. Stay with us. He'll be here. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back here to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. We talk about a variety of commodities. It isn't often we talk about sugar.
It isn't, Max, but I felt like this was a good year to have that conversation given the depths of snow throughout the Red River Valley and the potential delays that could come with sugar beet planting there and the production of cane down in the Southwest. I had the chance to talk with Dr. Rob Johansson from the American Sugar Alliance, and I asked if we had enough processing capacity for all this production.
We have seen an increase in refining capacity. Each year, our companies are investing in their factories, in their processors, and their refineries to improve, recalibrate their machinery in there, and that has increased capacity. We've been growing. The U.S. production of the domestic crop has been increasing each year. This year, we're expected to see a record cane crop. Florida and Louisiana both are bringing in a good crop. And certainly with beet production too, we're seeing some increases in capacity. Of course, we do have challenges as well. We did potentially lose one processing facility in Montana, so it's likely that even though we still have plenty of the last year's crop from Sydney that's been produced into sugar, it's going to be ready to sell this year, we are going to lose that facility. So, while we are seeing increases in some facilities, we also have seen some consolidation. This is the first one we've seen in quite the last couple of years. So, but by and large, it is an increasing amount of domestic production that's going on in the U.S.
Before we let you go, Andrew, talking to sugar growers across the country, are prices set to at least make sugar pay this year?
Well, that's always the $10,000 question. Producers are always looking to see a better return on their crop. And we have seen strong prices, certainly on the futures markets. But that being said, as you mentioned, they're balancing that against those high input costs. So I think mainly what folks are looking at right now is to see some of those energy costs come down. The diesel prices have been really cutting into the farmer's bottom line. Last year we did have some good crops in a lot of regions. So hopefully, those markets are still, finalizing out, and that crop is still being sold. So once they see the final payments coming back to them, they'll be able to ink out their bottom line. But they're heading into the fields right now with the expectation of a good crop.
Well, the sugar industry definitely grappling with a lot of those factors that are facing commodity producers all across this country. That was Rob Johansson of the American Sugar Alliance.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. In California, where successfully managing water supplies has proven to be a little bit challenging, there may be more challenges we hear. Greg Solier, what's the story on that?
Well, already the snow melt and temperatures that have skyrocketed relative to the cool and the averages for the time of year from the desert Southwest on northward into areas of the divide. That has since and will be expected to shift off to the east and southeast, but it's another system in and across coastal sections of the Pacific Northwest that will influence California's weather. Again, already snow melt underway. They're keeping an eye on reservoir levels, streams and rivers, and more to come, as they say. But still, this late season chill is dominant through the Canadian Prairie, the Dakotas, and still many a stream and river at and better than Bankful, James River, Red River Valley of the North, Upper Mississippi River Valley. Just imagine, though, a year ago, even 6 months ago, couldn't get anything in the way of barge traffic down the Missouri or the Mississippi. Anyway, here's this weather system into the coastal sections. A little piece of it will move into the Canadian Prairie and serve up another round of moisture in one form or another. We think most in the way of any accumulating snow. Livestock managers into the Canadian Prairie. We do move into milder, drier weather conditions, Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, the late portion of the week. It's this weather system here that by early to middle parts of the week will have generated a wide swath of rain into the valley locales. At the same time, snow melt. So the specter of maybe some flooding is coming into play, and you drop those temperatures up aloft here, middle to late parts of the week. This is a very slow moving system. That colder up aloft will generate some thunderstorm activity, the potential for maybe some severe weather into the valleys of California. And we'll get some significant rain in the desert southwest, maybe kick up a little bit of dust as well. It is warmth across areas of the southern plains. And how about the rain last week as expected in Kansas? And there'll be maybe a little more to come here. Nothing to really do much of the drought, but at least a psychological improvement there. Seasonal warmth ahead of this weather system, Max, across the southwest until the showers and thunderstorms move on through.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it's too little too late to help out the wheat crop. Though we know there have been times when you get an April rain, it certainly adds to the yield there, as Mike and his guest were talking a little bit earlier. What do you see for the middle part of the country then moving on?
Moving on, we do foresee kind of a back and forth scenario of temperatures. It's been frost and freeze over the past week to 10 days. More freeze potential into Nebraska. Frost all the way down to the Ozarks, and the last of one cold core upper low, and even a couple of snowflakes mixed into the southern Great Lakes region early portions of the week. Otherwise, we get some dry time much needed across areas of the northern plains and upper Midwest. That changes. A little piece of that California system will break loose, move into the plains, and will generate a fair covering of moisture late in the week across the western Corn Belt, probably aggravating ongoing runoff into the upper Midwest and northern plains. But at least it's a return, Max, to more seasonal temperatures and hopefully some boost on some of those soil readings across sections of the Corn Belt. And depending on soil moisture levels, maybe even a little bit of planting and field work anticipated. Until some of that California impact moves into the southern plains, it is warm in the desert southwest in through Texas as well. A lot of rain from Wichita Falls and severe weather south of the Metroplex last week, but things are pretty quiet and cool across areas of the Tennessee Valley. A little frost in the Ohio Valley early portions of the week. This weather system and waiting for the one in California will maybe generate, hopefully, maybe some degree of meaningful rainfall again. Parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, showers and thunderstorms in through Texas. And Max, a pretty active and moisture-laden weather pattern. Yes, the weather guy said that for the desert southwest, the middle to late parts of the week.
A farmer who watches us in Delaware said they picked up some beneficial moisture in the past week in the form of rain there.
Exactly. And things are in relatively good order across areas of the northeast of New England until you take a look at the maps and charts from the past couple of weeks. And again, early on this week, another one of these cold core midwinter type lows with rain and snow into the northeast of New England, a chill in the air and frost and freeze into the western Corn Belt. That'll move into the eastern sections of the belt in Ohio Valley until we get some milder, drier high pressure for the southern mid-Atlantic region. Opportunities for some field work across the eastern Corn Belt. Shower activity over the western sections of the belt, middle to late portions of the week. Over the southeastern states, some frost potential into the Tennessee Valley. Nice to see some welcome rains of late down through Florida. We'll keep an eye on that southern plain states weather system to kick up showers and thunderstorms in the Delta. Opportunities for some field work with mild, dry, high pressure over the southeast as the week wears on.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. We really are interested in seeing Greg Solier's rain gauge projections for the week ahead. Who'll get plenty?
After you dump it out into the central and southern plains, including Kansas, put it right back out there. It won't firm and freeze up. We'll get another round of rain. Nibbling at the drought. We'll take it 0.5 to 1. Kansas on southward. Severe weather across the southern plains and Gulf Coast. Middle to late parts of the week. A little more rain, maybe up to 1/2 inch south of I-70. The ongoing flooding continues through the upper Midwest. And speaking of flooding and severe, it'll be California, 1 to 4 plus into the Pacific Northwest as well, Max. Again, from a drought to a flood, the beat goes on in California.
Mother's Day is coming up. This public service announcement for those of you watching, you amateurs out there, you want to make sure we take care of Mom. And how does the weather look in that week up to the 14th?
Well, from a temperature standpoint, kind of a lingering pocket or two of cold here into the upper Midwest. We're going to watch these systems vary back and forth. The cold weather intrusions, warmth over the southeast, a little below in the southwest. Pacific Northwest warming up okay, where there's more moisture, including California. Late in the season, we'll take it. Desert southwest into the plains, back to more normalized moisture for the eastern Corn Belt and southeastern states. Dry time for eastern Canadian Prairie, but additional drought relief, field work delays probably as well across the Corn Belt.
When do we really get the warmth surging up over the country?
Now, we see it in bits and pieces, but this contrast of temperatures as well. You'll see that as we get later into the month, but here's some cool weather into the upper Midwest. The warmth of the Ohio Valley and southeastern states, that'll help soils. Temperatures about normal across the west, but weather pattern continues on. Beneficial moisture for the Pacific Northwest. More maybe flooding potential, late season snow at the Canadian border. And yeah, plan accordingly. Field work delays with corn and soybean planting in mind across the Corn Belt.
Approaching Memorial Day, we better be warming up, one would think, that last week of May.
Yeah, we're warming things up, but we're dropping temperatures down as well. So you get this almost midsummer heat ridge here over the southeast. Here's a push of colder air and plenty of it up through the Canadian Prairie and the northern plains. And so the jet stream remains buckled and kind of low in latitude. So that means frontal boundaries drop on in, they stall on out. Disturbances track along it. We'll do just that with another round of moisture for the Pacific Northwest, the heart of the plains, and northeast across the Corn Belt into New England.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Folks attending the Half Century of Progress in Illinois later on this summer will see some great individual displays. By all means, I might see this tractor. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants, made to make it last. Well, when the Half Century of Progress rolls around, August 24th through the 27th at Rantoul, Illinois, there will be tractors lined up, various displays, various makes of tractors. You'll see machines working in the fields and outstanding individual displays, such as this one, putting on display the equipment of M&W. Our friend Bill Burnham is getting together his exhibit that'll be on the display there. The M&W Gear Company back in the day made parts to allow tractors to work even better than the way they were designed by the manufacturers. And Northern Illinois farmer friend Bill Burnham has had a passion through his adult life for these parts made by M&W. But he hasn't just collected them in a box or put them up on a wall. He has restored them and installed them on superbly restored farm-haul tractors so you can see how they were to work. No doubt Bill, with the help of some great friends, will again load up some beautiful farm-hauls for the Rantoul show. Stop by and visit with him there. Bill Burnham, Morris, Illinois. We'll see him at the Half Century of Progress. Now let's find out from Mark Stock just what's going to be selling at Big Iron.
Well, Max, the feeder cattle market is super hot right now in Mountain View, Oklahoma. May the 2nd, 45 head of black, red, and char feeder heifers will sell to the highest bidder on BigIron.com. Also, 278 acres of Stevens County, Kansas land located by Liberal, Kansas will sell on May the 2nd. 2 tracts in Benton County, Missouri will sell, land located by Cole Camp, Missouri. We've got a great lineup of equipment selling next week. On May the 3rd, EH Ranch will sell a pair of 2017 John Deere S680 combines. The equipment is located by Dix, Nebraska, also selling Case IH 1680 combine. KRW Construction out of Blair, Nebraska will sell a pair of Mack Granite CV713 triaxle dump trucks, 2007 and 2006 year model machines. Plus they've got a Kenworth T300 hook truck, an International TerraStar 4x4 service truck, a Freightliner Columbia 120 semi-truck tractor with a wet kit as well. Lucas Cattle Company from Cross Timbers, Missouri will sell 47 items. A Lull Highlander telehandler, a Caterpillar 14G motor grader, a 1978 GMC C7000 floater dry spreader. They've got push-pull scrapers and Caterpillar track loaders. Check it all out on SullivanAuctioneers.com and BigIron.com with a lot of quality equipment.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. Now it's time to meet that next generation of ag leaders, and joining us this week is McKenna Garrett. She serves as the Virginia State FFA Secretary, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, sir, for having me. I really appreciate it.
McKenna, what was it about FFA that appealed to you and made you want to join?
Actually, when I began high school, I wasn't signed up for an agriculture course. I was signed up for a dance class that really, about a week before our classes started, I realized was not where I belonged. So after quite a few emails with my guidance counselor, I realized that agriculture was where I needed to be. So I got moved into a veterinary science course, which was more for juniors and seniors. But my first day of freshman year, I walked in there and found a home. And so that's where it all began, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
That is fantastic. Did you have any neat experiences with your vet tech team?
Yes, sir. Actually, I competed in veterinary science my freshman year and was able to win as a team that year across the state, and I placed third as a freshman. So we had the opportunity to compete at nationals the following fall, my sophomore year.
Well, that is a lot of fun. McKenna, what are you excited about here finishing out your year of service this year in Virginia?
Right now, we have begun banquet season, which is so much fun, or at least I think, because we get to go back and see the chapters that we worked with all year, celebrate their accomplishments, and see them off to their next chapter.
That is always a fun time of year. And McKenna, what is next in your life? Do you hope to make agriculture your career?
Yes, sir, I do. I'm headed to Oklahoma State University to major in agriculture education. I'm hoping to do a little bit with soil science, whether that's research, I'm not quite sure, but I'm super excited for it.
Well, we wish you the very best. McKenna Garrett, Virginia FFA State Secretary, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you, sir.
It isn't often that we do a book review on this broadcast, and it's even more unusual that I highly recommend a book. But here's one you want to take a look at. It's called Back to the Futures: Crashing Dirt Bikes, Chasing Cows, and Unraveling the Mysteries of the Commodity Futures Markets. Respected ag economist Scott Irwin is the author, joining us here this weekend. Scott, would I be accurate if I called it, yes, part autobiography, part primer to the futures markets, an economic guide, a history of the futures markets? There's a lot wrapped up in your book.
Yes, I think that's a pretty accurate way to look at it, Max. I wanted to write a book that was a fun and interesting and entertaining way to learn about the markets that have been the passion of my professional life my whole adult life. And so that's what I tried to do.
You start out of the book talking about a near-death experience. You were hit by a Pepsi truck. And then throughout, you point out that you were close to the precipice on different occasions there throughout not just your early life, but throughout your education and your economic career.
Well, taking some extreme risks, I have to own that, Max. That was a clear part of my growing up, my youth on the farm out in Iowa. We were pretty wild kids, and so I used those stories as kind of market parables to help with some insights about the way the markets work. So I have had an unusual amount. I think I've used up my 9 lives.
Your description of the pit trading, the open outcry trading at LaSalle and Jackson in Chicago really rang a bell with many of us who watched that era as well. It was raucous. It was rough. These were interesting characters who occupied the pits of the Chicago Board of Trade and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
Absolutely. After the grain elevator, the pits in Chicago were clearly the second most important thing that attracted me to the grain markets, and they were filled with colorful characters. There was a culture, a lifestyle that I just found electric, and so did many other people, and I wanted to communicate that in parts of the book.
You talk about the risks, and you talk about the important function that the futures markets provide in laying off the risk for the producers. And yet producers, of course, as you note in your book, have hated the speculators at times, have distrusted them, have referred to them as crooks. You try to sort through that a bit, I know.
Right, that's really the heart and soul of the book, is to try to explain to people the important role that the much maligned speculators play in these markets. Without them, there wouldn't be the liquidity, the information gathering that is required to have a successful, long-lived market. Yes, sometimes they do attempt to do things like manipulation in the market that no one likes, and we have to deal with. But on net, over time, they play a positive role, and that's what I try to get across as a message.
You also talked about the terrible tragedy in the 70s of our interfering with the global grain trade, the behemoth that was created in South America in their Brazilian grain market opportunity because we stopped exports to Japan. Elaborate on that just a bit.
Well, that happened in 1973, when I was in high school, so now you know my age, and the soybean market in particular was on a tear, and we were in a big inflationary time, and the Nixon administration was heavy into price controls and intervening in the markets, and so they stopped exports, something that my late father never forgave President Nixon for. And it did jumpstart the soybean production industry in Brazil, and look at where we are today, almost 50 years later.
Lest we forget, and I'm not sure you referred to this one, there's been some bipartisan idiocy here. Jimmy Carter had his own embargo with the Soviet Union trade, and that too had ramifications. Did you touch on that in your book?
I did talk a little bit about that. I didn't go into great depth, but yeah, that is a bipartisan issue for sure. And it was another example of banning exports in response to a political event, and it didn't really work. It's kind of interesting, Max. You really see this being replayed with the current Russia-Ukraine war, where we've tried to restrict exports, and it's just hard for economic embargoes to work, yet politicians seem addicted to them.
It's a book that is instructional, it's educational, it is entertaining. Congratulations to you, Scott Irwin, on your book, Back to the Futures. Where's the best way to get it?
It's easy to find. It's available on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, and hardback version. So just go on Kindle and search for Back to the Futures, Scott Irwin, and it'll go right to the page.
Folks will love it. We're just ahead of Father's Day and Mother's Day. It's a good gift-giving idea. Best wishes to you, Scott, for much success with your book, Back to the Futures.
Thank you very much.
Scott Irwin, respected agriculture economist at the University of Illinois. Mike?
Max, I guess whether you're a professor or a farmer, we all have those stories of the markets getting a little hairy on us.
Yeah, some people have a tendency to think of those in the futures markets as crooks, you know. They've been referred to that way by farmers, but they handle the risk, allowing farmers to lay off that risk. You would especially enjoy the book because of your Iowa roots.
I look forward to reading it.
There's more coming up next weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll update you on planting progress or lack of it, and the weather seemed to have a great week, a safe week. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.